Um, and I'm currently in my second year of my master's at here at the University of Toronto, and I study virology, specifically influenza virus.
And
Uh,
and is are you in your fourth or fifth year with the Varsity Blues?
Fifth year with the team.
So she is a star on the University of Toronto Varsity Blues ice hockey team. Rock on. And you missed the introduction to Jackie Pieri. Jackie say a couple of hockey terms, icing, you know, back checking, whatever. Go ahead. You could talk a little hockey amongst yourself.
Oh,
I'm also an ice hockey player. It's nice to meet you. It's pretty cool.
yeah, nice to meet you too.
All right, Juliette, you're on.
All right. Um, are you seeing the right presentation?
Right now,
Here,
it look,
wait. Yeah,
yeah,
I was about to say that didn't look right with me. Here, let me.
I only saw black.
Okay, let's try this again.
There it is.
How does that look? Okay, great. So, hi everybody. My presentation today is going to be on One Health, and a little bit of a disclosure, like I'm still a student, I'm still learning about all of these things. By no means am I an expert in any of these topics, but it is a topic that I've been learning about through my research experience and my learning at the University of Toronto, and it's something that I've become quite passionate about, and I think it's a really nice framework, both for people who work more in human health like me, and also for people who care about the environment to really um, integrate into their work. And so I'm hopeful that everybody will learn a little something about One Health today. And I already gave an introduction, so this is just a little bit more of an introductory slide about me and what I do. Like Lou said, fifth year at the University of Toronto, Varsity Blues women's ice hockey team, and master's student at the University of Toronto as well, in the Department of Laboratory Medicine and Pathobiology. And now I'll just jump into what is One Health. So One Health really, it's not really a research discipline. It's more of like a research framework. So it's a way to approach research, policy, advocacy, all of these different aspects of, you know, things that we use in a variety of disciplines, including to combat climate change. And it's a way of really approaching these issues with the understanding and the viewpoint that human health, animal health, and environmental health are intrinsically interconnected, right? All of us are on this planet. We're sharing the same environment. We're interacting with one another in direct and indirect ways. And that means that human health and human population health is intrinsically linked to the health of animals, plants, ecosystems, and the environment as a whole. Um, and really what this allows you is to sort of take a step back and take a wider lens and look at the big picture of how all of these systems are interacting with one another. And it allows you to make connections that you couldn't really make if you were solely focused on just one of these pillars of One Health. And you can then apply this framework in a variety of different ways as well, at a variety of different levels. So you can, if you're somebody who works on local issues, you can take a One Health approach just locally in your area. If you're somebody who's working on national and international policy, you can take a One Health approach on a global scale. So it's a really nice framework that can be as broad or as specific as you need it to be. And it's applicable in a huge variety of disciplines, as I'll get into a little bit more in this presentation. And I just want to start with acknowledging that One Health wouldn't exist without the indigenous ways of knowing and being that have existed for centuries before the term One Health was ever coined, that really are the cornerstone of what One Health is, right? This idea that humans and wildlife and plants and the environment are interconnected, and that our health is really dependent on the health of everything around us. Those are ideas that have been passed down in Indigenous communities for an extremely long time. And it's important that as we move forward with One Health, we both acknowledge the fact that we can't really achieve One Health without addressing the disparities that exist between Indigenous peoples and other people and all over the world, and also allowing Indigenous communities to have a seat at the table as we try to create policies and frameworks and conduct research that has a One Health focus. And now moving on to more novel developments in the field of One Health. I'll be focusing a bit on the quadripartite on One Health today. And what this is it's a collaboration, because One Health really is built on collaboration, of all of these different UN entities that focus on different areas that are all relevant to One Health. So you have the World Health Organization, which, as we all know, focuses on human health. The World Organization for Animal Health, which is essentially the WHO for animals, and they're concerned with wildlife and with domestic animals and animals that are being farmed. We also have the United Nations Environmental Program, which, self-explanatory, is concerned with environmental health, and then the Food Agriculture Organization, which has interests in agriculture, which I'll get into a little bit more about how that's relevant to One Health, and also obviously when you're looking at farmed animals, the FAO has an interest in that as well. And the aims of this collaboration are essentially to make One Health a priority and implement it both in policy, in campaigns for awareness and public knowledge, and in research. So it's a really great collaboration, and I'm very hopeful that some good things are going to come out of this. And because they have put out a lot of great papers and frameworks, I'm going to be sort of following their action track framework for this talk, because I think that they hit a lot of the topics that are important for One Health really well. And so I will be kind of skipping over action track 1, which is enhancing One Health capabilities and strengthening health systems, just because that's a kind of a more technical health system area that I really have very little knowledge or expertise in, and wouldn't really be the best person to be presenting on that. But the rest of the areas are really, really great examples of where One Health really shines as the best framework for approaching challenges that we have, both in animal, human, plant, environmental health. And then I won't get into applications too much today, but they focus on applying One Health in different areas, both in governments and policies, an organization, and trying to integrate with different communities, and then also in data and evidence, which really is research, is trying to make sure that our research is following a framework where we're obtaining knowledge from all of these areas as well, because they are interconnected, and we're not going to get the full picture if we don't look at everything. So as I said, skipping forward to action track 2, this action track is focused on preventing emerging and zoonotic diseases. And what this means is zoonotic diseases are diseases that spread between humans and animals. And an emerging disease is essentially like a novel disease in a certain population. Could be a human population, could be an animal population. And these diseases have a huge, huge impact on human health. So as you can see in the first point, 60% of human infectious diseases, originally originated in animals. So that's a majority. That's a pretty big chunk. And I'm sure you'll recognize some of the diseases that are listed just below that. COVID-19 pandemic, that virus jumped from an animal population into humans. And I think it's a phenomenal example of how important it is to really try to prevent these zoonotic outbreaks, because the whole world was shut down because of this, right? It had such a big impact, not just on health, but on economies, communities, like all of these different aspects. And so that virus and a lot of other diseases, that some of which are mentioned here, and there's a plethora of others that I haven't listed. These are very important pathogens, both for humans and for animals, right? A lot of these diseases can also be present in pets, in livestock, and they can have, and wild animals too, and they can have a really significant impact on the health of those animals. And why this is such an important One Health issue is that, one, the more diseases are spreading in animal populations and the more humans interact with those animals that have these diseases, the more likely these zoonotic jumps, essentially, from animals to humans or humans to animals are to occur. And there's a lot of behaviors that humans are taking that are affecting this. So one of the biggest ones is our land use. As humans continue to develop wild areas for, development of buildings and cities or development of agricultural land, we're putting ourselves in a position to be interacting with the wildlife that previously called those areas home. And that can lead that as we continue to develop more and more land, we're interacting more and more with this wildlife that may harbor diseases that otherwise we wouldn't have come into contact with. And this can lead to more and more instances of potential jumps of pathogens from animals into humans or from humans into animals. And also when you're looking at developing these lands for agricultural use, if you're farming animals on these lands, you can get your domestic animals coming into contact with wildlife, and essentially they can act as sort of a bridge. So you can get, say, a virus jumping from a bat into a pig on a pig farm, and then that pig can infect the pig farmer. So really, the way we approach humans entering these formerly, ecological wild spaces is really going to affect the instances of zoonotic jumps. Also, consumption of animal products. Animal products can contain a lot of the pathogens that are present in the animals. And then when humans are handling or eating these products, they can contract those diseases as well if that handling or that food preparation isn't done properly. And I'll get more into that in a later slide. And then finally, climate change, right? We're affecting the areas that these animals can survive in because of the way that the climate is changing, and shifts in the range of these animals can really affect interactions both between different animal species and between a bunch of different animal species and humans as well. And again, any type of shift can lead to potentially new emergences of new diseases. And so this is a really important aspect where if we're not taking into account the fact that how animal populations are doing is affecting the risk that these zoonotic diseases pose to human health, then we're not really getting the full picture. And this is actually sort of the area of One Health that I've done the most work in. I've done a bit of work both in my undergrad and a bit in my master's as well on One Health related topics related to zoonotic diseases. And so these are just kind of, this is like a publication and a poster that I've done, just sort of exemplifying specific examples of how this is so important. So at the top, you have this publication from 2022. And essentially, I was very fortunate to help work on this paper where we found that SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is the virus that causes the disease COVID-19, had jumped from humans into white-tailed deer populations in Canada and had circulated in those deer populations for quite a while, and then actually ended up jumping back and infecting a human. And this particular strain had, because it had circulated in deer populations so long, had become very, very different from the type of SARS-CoV-2 viruses that we were seeing circulate in humans at that time. And so we only found one human case of this particular lineage. However, this just exemplifies how diseases jumping between animals and humans can pose a huge risk, right? Like it could have happened that a variant could have evolved in animals, jumped back into humans, and really taken off and caused a whole lot more infections and unfortunately a whole lot more mortalities potentially. And so just showing how really the interactions between how diseases circulate in animals and how they circulate in humans is really important for human health, not just animal health, although that is also very important. If we're giving our bugs to animals, then that can potentially hurt them as well. And so next, I'm going to move on to action track 3, which is vector-borne diseases. And what a vector-borne disease is it's a disease that's born or spread by a vector. And vectors can be a whole lot of different things like mosquitoes, ticks, or fleas that feed on humans, pets, livestock, and wildlife. So as you can see, this can be a really impactful way for diseases to spread between humans, pets, livestock, and wildlife, which makes them a really important One Health issue. And as listed on the slide, vector spread diseases are often very, very severe, like malaria, dengue, Zika. These are all diseases that you do not want. They're very severe. They cause quite high mortality. And unfortunately, they're becoming more and more prevalent. And that's because climate change is actually leading to habitat shifts in these vectors. So one of the important factors of vector-borne diseases is they're actually limited by the environment that the vector can exist in, right? If a mosquito can't survive the Canadian winter, then that mosquito can't be in Canada spreading, say, Zika if it has Zika, because it can't exist there. But as the climate warms, these vectors are really expanding their habitats. And hopefully you can see the movement in this figure at the bottom as it's showing like the progression of the habitat of this mosquito's Aedes aegypti, also known as the yellow fever mosquito. And this mosquito carries yellow fever, it carries Zika, it carries dengue, as well as some other pathogens as well. So even if just this one mosquito species spreads, even just a part of what this figure is showing could be the potential spread by 2050 and 2080. We're looking at a lot more human populations that are going to be exposed potentially to the pathogens that this mosquito species carries. And again, that's just one species of vector, and there are tons of species of vectors. So this is a huge One Health issue because we're seeing diseases that can affect humans and animals spreading much higher into the north and into the lower into the south as these habitats shift for these vectors. And also that's being caused by human actions, right? It's being caused by climate change. And so our actions are directly leading to the potential further spread of these diseases. And now action track 4 is focused on food safety. And food safety is a One Health issue because we farm plants and animals, which are both parts of One Health, and then we consume those plants and animals. And the way we consume those plants and animals can affect human health. And according to the World Health Organization, almost 1 in 10 people globally will contract a foodborne disease each year. And so if you've ever gotten food poisoning, you know it's not fun. And a lot of people all over the world contract diseases from the food that they eat every year. And this happens because essentially these bugs exist in the agriculture, right? They're either in the animals that we, farm, package, prepare, and eat, or they can be even like on the surface of produce. If you've heard about all of the recalls for romaine lettuce, you know that there's a lot of bugs that can be on the surface of produce products as well, and also things like chemicals and pesticides, and those can also affect human health. And so basically the way that we approach agriculture and the way that we work to not just protect the animals and keep the produce as clean and as sanitary as possible, and also the way that we process and distribute these products can really have an effect on the health of human populations. And now moving on to action track 5, which is antimicrobial resistance. Antimicrobial resistance is essentially when microbes, think bacteria or viruses, evolve to be resistant to the drugs that we use to combat them. So this is becoming a larger and larger issue globally. And it's highly, highly concerning because if you have a severe infection of, say, a bacteria, and none of the antibiotics that we have on the market is working against that bacteria because that bacteria is resistant, then you're in a very, very tough spot to get to a recovery and to fight that bacteria off yourself without any help from antibiotics. And the reason this is a One Health issue is because antibiotics are used very heavily in agriculture. Over 80%, or at least 80% of antibiotics sold in the US are used in agriculture. We use them super, super heavily. And of those, 70% are medically important, meaning that essentially those antibiotics, if resistance does emerge, it will have an implication on human health because it's important to the bacteria that can infect humans. And so essentially the way we use antibiotics in animals directly affects the ability of those antibiotics to function in humans. And those pathogens can spread between animals and humans, right? I already talked about how people who work in agriculture can be exposed to a lot of different animals and the bugs that exist in those animals. And also they can spread between humans and animals through the environment. This is kind of called antibiotic pollution. So as antibiotics get into the environment, bacteria, let's say, that exist in the environment can evolve resistance to those antibiotics. And that can really pose an issue if you're out in the environment and you contract that bacteria. And so really, this is a great One Health issue because all aspects of One Health are really important to this. The way we use antibiotics in animals, the way we use them in humans, and the way that we manage them and dispose of them as humans so that they do or don't get into the environment, as well as in agriculture, because they can run off into waterways from agriculture as well. All of those are very interconnected and they affect how well our drugs work overall. And finally, moving on to action track 6, which is the environment. And I think this figure on the right-hand side of the slide really shows it best why environmental health is so integral to One Health. And that's because we all interact with the environment, right? You might not be directly interacting with a certain animal out in the wild or on a farm, but you're both sharing air and waterways, and you're also sharing that air and those waterways with the plants that we have and everybody else on the planet. And so basically the environment is what really connects all of us, even if we're not in direct contact with one another. And so environmental health is really, really important because it affects the health of everybody who shares the environment. And I have this figure from the WHO, which stated that in 2016, 1 in 4 global deaths was linked to modifiable environmental risks. So while it might not have been a direct cause, they state that basically 1 in 4 global deaths in 2016 might have been avoided if we hadn't been doing what we're doing to the environment. And that's huge. That's an insanely large proportion of global deaths. And I think it really just shows the impact that a healthy environment is having on humans, not that we'll potentially have down the line at some point in the future, which has been a real challenge for people that don't really want to take immediate action on climate change. And they say, oh, it's a later problem. We're seeing it affect people already. People are dying that don't need to be dying because of the way we treat the environment already. It's happening. And this can occur in a number of different ways. One of which is contaminants in the water, and this can be things like chemicals, pesticides, plastic pollution, all of these things that get into the environment, right, come into contact with all of us, with plants, with animals, and with humans, and they affect all of our health. When you're also looking at rising global temperatures, and we've seen this in recent years too, heat waves are getting hotter and longer across the globe, and we know that this is causing heat-related deaths in humans, and it can also affect the health of plants and animals as well. And so a lot of the common diseases that occur from these types of environmental issues are things like cancer, chronic conditions like heart and lung disease, and like I said, heat-related deaths. And they're having a significant toll on the global human population and also on plants and animals. And this is a direct cause of human action. And so I think this is really just emphasizes the importance of continuing to combat pollution and climate change and all of these detrimental effects that humans are having on the environment. And finally, I just want to sort of encapsulate everything with a quote. This is from the WHO Director General, and he said this when he was invited to COP28, which had a more health-centric focus than previous COP meetings. And one of the things that he said in his address was that health can be a game changer for climate action, and that's because it matters to everyone. And so, as everybody knows, it can be really challenging to convince people that climate change is urgent and that all of these other environmental issues that we care about, they're urgent, they're important, and we need to take immediate action. And one of the things that is so beneficial about the One Health framework is it can be used to sort of take advantage of the things that people already intrinsically care about. People care if they and their loved ones are healthy. They care if their communities are healthy. They care if their children can go outside and play and don't have to worry about excessive heat or chemicals in the environment or all of these different things. And so it's a really wonderful framework for climate rhetoric because you have the evidence that, hey, like we're seeing this effect, like your health is being affected by what we're doing. This isn't just a question of what might happen to populations down the line or what could happen to people on the other side of the world. Everybody is currently being affected by a lot of these different issues. And so I think that if nothing else, the One Health framework really is a great tool for those of us that are advocating for climate action. And on that note, I just want to share a couple steps that everybody can take to not just be an EcoAthletes champion, but also be a One Health champion. And essentially, what these steps are is they're being good teammates, right? We're on the same team as animals and as the environment and as plants. All of us need to work together to be healthy. And so by supporting environmental, animal, and plant health, you're helping the whole team out. You're being a great teammate. And a lot of everybody on this call is already doing a great job because you're part of EcoAthletes and you're already trying to combat climate change. And if you're already doing that, keep doing it because it's not just affecting the environment, it's affecting the health of everybody that has to share that environment. And if you're an ecologist and you care about animal health, keep working on animal health because animal populations and ecosystems need to be healthy for humans to be able to maintain healthy populations as well. And so if you're trying to stop pollution, continue trying to stop pollution because pollution is affecting everybody that has to interact with the air and with water and with the land. And one thing that I would encourage everybody to do is take it one step further and look at what you're passionate about and see how does this overlap with other areas and other people with different expertise that I could work with. So as I said, I worked on a project that that looked at deer populations, and we sampled them for SARS-CoV-2 virus. And we collaborated with animal health researchers, with wildlife experts. And our lab is based here at a hospital in Toronto. And so we got to really work with people that had a variety of expertise. And it was such a phenomenal experience to get to really support people and work with people in other areas on a topic that all of us cared about. And so I'd really encourage you to look at ways that your favorite or your climate passion is a One Health issue, and then try to work with others in other areas of One Health to strengthen your work and their work at the same time. And finally, I just want to share some resources. If you liked this talk and you want to learn more, there's a lot more about One Health. Like I said, I'm no expert, and this is a pretty basic presentation. And so if you want to read more and learn more and get involved, there's a lot of really great resources on here, a lot of which I used when I was putting this presentation together. And I'd be happy to chat with you about One Health as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Juliette. And we're going to put this presentation up on our toolkit. So, and then you can scroll through to get to the resource page, so everyone will have access to that. Again, Juliette, thank you for taking us through this. I'm going to open it up for questions from any of our champions. Please go forth. Etienne, you're up first.
Yeah, I suppose it's a partly a question and partly a comment. So yeah, first of all, thank you very much, Juliette. That was really interesting, and I learned a little bit about this stuff already, and that was adding to that knowledge. So that's really cool. I really agree with, I can't remember his name now. It's a very long and complicated name. The boss of the WHO, is it, saying he did quite a bit during COVID, didn't he? And I think in sport, the power of the connection between health and well-being in sport is really, really easy to make. So it's just a small extra jump, I think. Maybe even a smaller jump for many people, you know, when they're thinking about sport. And then you can start to talk about One Health as well. So I think that's really, really nice. I suppose my question was a little bit about, the question I had was, I think, you know, if I was being kind of blunt about it, a major problem, a major source of the issue here is animal agriculture, as far as I can tell, because of the way that it's conducted, essentially, and the risks of it being done at this scale with the motivations that it has, which are not, I think it's fair to say, with the interests of health and well-being of either animals or people at heart. Really, there is about, you know, profits and production. And there are organizations obviously involved in this that are very closely associated with the animal agriculture industry in all its different angles. Do you get the feeling, I guess it's that classic problem, right, that it is about engaging from kind of a closer position with these kind of organizations, you know, the kind of organizations that are part of the problem, if I say it bluntly, versus kind of campaigning and shouting from the outside and exposing them and holding them to account? Do you have a sort of sense of the dynamics going on in this area? Because I'm kind of more familiar, I suppose, with what's going on maybe in terms of fossil fuel companies and high carbon industries. In this particular area, I'm a little bit less strong, but I wonder if you have any comments about, like, yeah, that closeness and the challenge of dealing with the problem and how you deal with it kind of at source in one particular area, which is animal agriculture.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm less familiar with the policy side of it. So as far as like how government and non-government organizations are interacting with, you know, agricultural groups and even down to the level of like individual farmers. I'm not too familiar with. I know from a research perspective, if you want to do research on agriculture, on animal health, on farms, you need to be on good terms with these workers, right? Like, and it makes sense. Why would anybody let you on their land around their animals, if they know that you're coming for them and that you're, you know, and so, it definitely does become more of a collaborative relationship where instead of, you know, trying to just tell people how to do their work, a lot of research really focuses on, okay, like we want to get in there, we want to get a better idea of what's going on, and we want to work with you to make this work as well as we can. And some people will argue that, you know, change isn't happening fast enough or drastically enough when you take that approach. And certainly there are merits to that argument as well. But a lot of people who work in agriculture and organizations that represent people who work in agriculture, they want farmers to be healthy, right? And so if you're approaching people on the level of like, no, like we care about you and your animals, and your health and your animals' health is important to us on an individual level, and also because of the way that your health and the health of your animals is going to affect human health and wildlife health, you know, beyond just your land. And people can be, you know, people can get on board with that. And so I think that having the approach of sort of working together from a research perspective has been a helpful approach. It's allowed more research to be done. It's allowing people who work in agriculture to become more educated on these topics as they interact and work with researchers. And I think that there is a time and a place for standing up and really saying like, yes, like these, you know, things need to change, drastically. But I think that both approaches are necessary. And I think that both have advantages that aren't present in the other. And so I think using both in tangent, and really basing, you know, what approach you're using on what outcome are you trying to get, right? Because if, as researchers, if we're trying to work with people, we need to take a collaborative approach. If you're an activist and your goal is to, and you know, create change as rapidly as possible, then maybe your approach is going to be different. So yeah, no, I think a balance is necessary.
I have a question.
Maya, you're up.
For me, I think like the one thing I think about when you talk about food and agriculture is really interesting. Thank you for talking about it again. So interesting to hear. For me, the question is what's the best way of finding out? So, because, you know, as an athlete, we have to look after our health and, you know, choosing the right foods or wherever it, and, you know, bring the environmental side into it of choosing what the best foods are, where they've come from, especially, and the health of them, whether they're healthy enough or they have chemicals in them that are going to be, you know, they're going to affect you, or having an idea of, or it's mainly just like having an education around the health of and where the best places are to go to look for where meat has been farmed, you know, in an environmental way, I guess. Like, you know, I'm not a vegan, but I try not to eat any beef. I'm mainly just chicken, and like I'm trying to cut that out of my diet, and you know, I'm very healthy. I feel like I'm getting as much as I need from what I'm eating, and I guess from my point of view, it's more just asking about where the best places are to look for the healthier farmed, like the well farmed places, and where you look to do that, because you know, people don't really think about it. They just go to the shop and buy, you know, whatever it is, some meat that might have been farmed really badly and you just don't know about it. But if there is a way of, or somewhere you can look to that says, okay, I've looked this up, I want to make sure that they've been farmed, or the animals have been farmed well, or I don't know what the word is for it, but in terms of like understanding that and having that education around it, I guess, do you have any like advice or suggestions on where to find that? If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I honestly, I think that there's other people in this group, probably on this Zoom call, who have a lot more knowledge about that than me. I'd say, like, based off of my knowledge and my expertise, like, I'd say one of the bigger things to focus on is, even if you can't 100% be sure, like, I don't know where this product was farmed, how it was treated, where it's coming from, but really doing what you need to do on your end when you're preparing your food. So if you are somebody who eats meat products, make sure your meat products are properly cooked, because you want to make sure that you're killing anything that could be in that meat, right? If you're properly cooking your meat, while it's obviously better to get meat that is, better from the start, you're putting yourself in a much better position when you're consuming that product. If you're somebody who eats produce, wash your produce, because there's a lot of things that can be on the outside of those produce just sitting there. And so trying to essentially, like, and there's a lot of steps that you could definitely take, and I'm sure there's people in EcoAthletes who have a lot of expertise about how to source your food more ethically, more sustainably. There are steps that you can take that, no matter where your food is coming from, you're making it safer for you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I guess it was more just the education around it, and
yeah,
like, I don't really, I'm not an expert at all, so it's more just asking if you have an idea, or if other people do, and who the best person slash it's so interesting to hear about the human health side, because I go abroad and I go to India and I have to eat food. Well, we have to be really, really healthy, and we actually can't drink from the water. We have to have plastic bottles, and that's like one thing I really struggle with. Like, I don't ever want to use plastic bottles, but we know the health risks, and because India is obviously, we've got, I don't know if anyone else has been to India, but the health risks are so much higher for people who don't live there, because they're not used to what people are eating, and there are lots of microbes and diseases that they want to stop us from having whilst we're out there. And people have food poisoning a lot of the time. A lot of the girls have had food poisoning whilst we've been out there. So it's just interesting, and I just want to make the comment because it does affect us without people really knowing. But yeah, I guess that was just more of a question about the education and stuff. So no, it's interesting to hear. Thank you.
One thing, and a great point, Maya, about the water issues in India and certainly other places in the world, and how you deal with that, and balancing, the trying to do right by the environment. I'm putting in the chat, it's a trailer for a film called The Game Changers. I don't know if any of you have heard it, seen it. Looks like Etienne is a booster. I give it a good Rotten Tomatoes score myself. And it's about plant-based diets. It's not saying you have to go plant-based, of course, but it's about athletes who have gone fully plant-based and how it's impacted their health and their performance athletically in positive ways. And one of the athletes featured in the film is Dotsie Bausch, who's an American track pursuit cyclist who won, I think she won silver at the same Olympics that Etienne won gold at London 2012 for the US. That's in the track, in a velodrome. And she's become a huge advocate and she's an EcoAthletes champion, and she's become a huge advocate for particularly dairy-free lifestyles and athletic performance. And she started a nonprofit. I'm putting it in the chat. called Switch for Good, about switching away from dairy. And again, it's not a 1 or a 0. You can reduce and see benefits as well. And there are huge environmental benefits to shifting towards a more plant-based approach, and health benefits, and per this film and per Switch for Good, athletic performance benefits. And then if you want to learn more about it, or if you want an introduction to DOTC, I'm happy to discuss that with you in the sidebar conversation. But I wanted to let you know. Jackie has had her hand raised, literally and figuratively.
Hi guys, sorry I had to turn off my video. I'm switching over to training from work. Really enjoyed the presentation, really enjoyed the questions also. I think this might just be a yes or no for you, Juliette, but I'm just curious if anyone in the medical world is thinking about how biodiversity loss will impact human health. I'm reading a lot about how like the interconnectedness within ecosystems often has like linchpin kind of species that we don't really anticipate how the loss of a species can impact the whole system. And I'm sure like we're a part of that system. So I'm just curious if there's any thoughts on like with how rapidly we're seeing biodiversity loss, if we have any known like human health impacts coming from that.
Yeah, no, certainly. And like your comment about keystone species, that's what we tend to call them in like the ecological like research space, like these species that have an outsized impact on the health of ecologies. And yes, like people are certainly thinking about that. I think that one of the things that it's getting better, certainly, but I think that people in the human health space are more resistant to One Health concepts than people who work in environmental and in animal health spaces. And I think it's starting to move in a good direction, which is positive. But yes, no, absolutely changes in ecosystems will affect human health. They affect they affect the way that diseases circulate in those ecosystems, and those diseases jump into humans. They affect the health of the plants in those ecosystems. They affect the health of pollinators, which affects the way that we can farm, which affects our food supply. All of these things are super, super interconnected, and people are well aware of this. There's a ton of research that gets done about this. And yeah, no, it's people that are experts in those spaces are really trying to push for those things to be addressed, because the impacts are catastrophic when you're looking at what could potentially happen to a variety of different systems that are so important to human health.
Now it looks like Etienne has another question.
Yeah, just conscious of the time, and I know perhaps we're running over. Was it supposed to finish on the hour? Okay, I'll be super quick. I was just kind of wondering, Juliette, if you had like comments on, I think Maya kind of brought this up, and I'm thinking that One Health is another good way of helping with this, is like the dissonance, the cognitive dissonance, the kind of trouble that is even, I think, harder for athletes to deal with when they know about it, is this need or perceived need to consume animal products to make sure that they are healthy. And that's been a really effective campaign, I suppose, of the animal agriculture industry to make it. And I think certainly when in my time in sports, a lot of the sports nutritionists were like, yes, you've got to just pile in this, that, and the other, and they will, all animal products. I'm thinking that, do you know, or do you think, it seems to me that One Health is a really good way of approaching that as well, because it helps to break down the dissonance and help to bridge that gap, because I think people could think, oh, actually, yeah, this is helping me to be healthier. And in a way, when all your team's sick because you've all drank the same, contaminated water or whatever when you're away, and that's been, contaminated, and there's all these different things, they start to kind of come again together, and it's a way of kind of getting over the kind of this difficulty that we have, because we're kind of told that you've got to do these things to be a good athlete. And in fact, flipping it completely around, you can say these things are really good for us as individuals, as athletes, and for our society. And I don't know if it's a question, but I suppose I don't know if you think that that sounds like a good idea, because to me it seems like another string in the way that we could communicate about this.
No, I completely agree. I think, yeah, oftentimes, especially athletes get so hung up on, what's best for our bodies, and, what's going to keep us as healthy as possible. And I think that sometimes what gets overlooked is that the choices we make, especially in things like the food that we consume, they have consequences beyond just the way that we obtain our nutrition, right? And so if the way that we're eating, sure, like meat is a super high protein source, yes, but it's going to have an outsized impact on climate change compared to, getting your protein from a plant-based source. And climate change harms human health. So really, like, it's basically shedding light on other consequences, right? Things aren't necessarily black and white. And there are areas where I think Maya was a great example. Like sometimes, like, what's better for your health and what you need to do to stay healthy is drink out of the plastic bottles when you're somewhere else. And yes, like using plastic isn't great for the environment, but sometimes like it's one or the other. But really, I think that you shed light on a very good area where it's like, there's another side of the coin. And so it's certainly another factor to take into account.
Thank you.
And
You.
thank you so much, Juliette. This was awesome. I want to quote Gary Gilliam, who was in our session the other night, who is an EcoAthletes champion. He played in the National Football League for 7 seasons as an offensive lineman. For you British folks, that doesn't mean much other than he's about 6'5", 300 pounds. And he has been plant-based since his playing, while he was playing. And he used to say, he says, I get my protein where your protein gets its protein, which I just love that line. A couple quick things. Our next community chat, which you'll be getting more reminders about, is you do not want to miss that one. If you're not in New Zealand and asleep, that's with Catherine Hayhoe at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, 3:30 p.m. British GMT. She's the chief scientist at the Nature Conservancy, greatest climate communicator I've ever heard, climate scientist, and an EcoAthletes Hall of Famer. And she's going to talk for maybe 10 minutes, and then she's just going to take questions from y'all. And she did this with us in 2021. This is her first time back with us since then. And we are going to open it up to the champions to invite a non-champion who might be interested in becoming a champion someday or not, to come to the Catherine session. So that's coming up. We're going to have an announcement on a new EcoAthletes Hall of Famer, the EcoAthletes Collegiate Cup, which is a fun challenge that will encourage folks to increase their exercise, because exercising in the cup will lead to funding carbon emission reductions. And you don't have to be part of the US collegiate or Canadian collegiate sports scene to take part in it. So that'll be coming up. And for those of you from the other side of the pond, this will get you more aware of this kind of crazy thing we have here in North America, which is college sports, and it's fun. So, and exercising leading to carbon emissions, that's like a win-win right there. Again, Juliette, thank you so much. Well done. Please send me over the the presentation, and then we will be back with you in a couple weeks with Catherine's community chat. Bye, y'all.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.